What's going on, everyone? Casey Pittman from the Rogueway Podcast here on this Saturday, and I am wearing my Semper Fidelis MF shirt because we're going to talk about my some of my experience in the Marine Corps. I've gotten some questions recently. Had some people who I've known whose sons or someone that they knew was thinking about going into the service. So I'm from a small town, and I'm one of the more well-known veterans in my town, although there are plenty others. And so I get a lot of questions, and specifically, I get questions about my experience in the Marine Corps. So I'm not going to try to sum all of that up at one time, but I'll start from a little bit of background, how I ended up in the Marine Corps, and what I thought about maybe through boot camp. So we'll just talk about that. First, I didn't start out in the Marine Corps. When I was 18 years old, I actually joined the Arkansas Army National Guard. And I spent 3 years in the Arkansas Guard. And some of that time, like a third of that time was on what we called, I don't know if it's still called this way. It's been a long time since I've been in, but back then it was called Active Duty for Special Work Orders, or ADSW orders. And I did 2 different jobs, and I know that you probably don't care about this, but just to kind of show you, this relates to how I ended up in the Marine Corps later. The first job I did full time for the Guard on those ADSW orders was working for a recruiter. And that's kind of where I really got the idea of the active duty, as far as, the benefits, and that, this was something that I could look at doing for several years. And I kind of got that urge to be active. I did that for a bit, and then after I completed that, I went on ADSW orders for a unit, and I'm not really sure what the status of this unit is anymore, but at the time it was called the Counter Drug, Arkansas Army National Counter Drug unit, and it was out of Camp Robinson. And I worked as a soldier on that team, doing various things. Mostly I worked at as an inspection station with the highway police, and assisted in looking for drug trafficking on the interstates. So that would bring up the question with most people. So did you go to Army boot camp? I did go to Army boot camp. I went to the regular active Army boot camp. However, unlike my Marine Corps career, which I was combat arms infantry, I didn't start out in the infantry. When I joined the Army National Guard, the unit that I was joining, my hometown unit, was not a combat arms unit. It was a motor transport support unit, or motor transport unit. So I didn't want to be a truck driver or a motor vehicle operator, but infantry, I would have to travel, and I didn't really have the means to do a lot of that. So I enlisted as a supply specialist with the specific job at our unit as being the unit armor. It was a 92 Yankee, and back then that was supply, and you did your armor's course, or your basic armor's weapon stuff. I can't remember how thorough my training was, because this was 1995. But I do remember that we did basic, weapons maintenance for the armory. I could, disassemble 50 calibers and, all that kind of stuff, and just basically armory stuff. So that was what I went to training for. And I went to boot camp because I wasn't infantry, and at the time, I don't know how they do it in the Army now. Excuse me. Damn COVID. Is that you, Rona? At the time, and I'm assuming it's still the same way, if you are infantry in the Army, you go to Fort Benning, and all the infantry does their boot camp, or their basic training, and their infantry training, their follow-up training, all in the same block, basically same place. So I didn't do that. I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. So my experience with Army boot camp was not infantry boot camp, as all my infantry Army friends have explained to me. So essentially, I guess that means that the Army basic training I went through wasn't as rigorous as the one the infantry went through. However, I got my infantry experience, guys. So let's just, get that out of the bag. That's what I went into the Marine Corps to do, and that's what I did. So after spending a couple years 3 years in the Guard, I petitioned my command to allow me to go active duty. I originally wanted to go active Army, but the Army would not allow me to change my military occupational specialty or my job when I went if I went regular Army. And I don't blame them. I mean, they've already paid for me, and they've already sent me to Army boot camp. They sent me to an Army school. There's no benefit for them to cross me over into, infantry or a ranger contract, which is actually what I wanted at that time. I could go to Ranger Battalion as a 92 Yankee, but I couldn't be an 11 Bravo, and that's what I wanted to do. So I had to make a decision, and that was go to the Army at whatever, at the 92 Yankee and just do what I do, or talk to another branch. And so I went next door, and the Marine Corps recruiter was sitting in the office, and I went in and I saw, one of them. My recruiter was actually a combat photographer, but the recruiter next to him was, was an infantry and a force recon guy and all that. And I just saw his pictures and his posters and all of his, motivational gear. And I said, okay, that's what I want to do. And the Marine Corps was completely okay with me, obviously, starting over and going to Marine Corps boot camp and giving me the infantry option. So I was a direct shipper. And what that meant was that I went to MEPS, I did all my physical work, I'd taken the ASVAB test. Yeah, I'd retake the ASVAB test for them, I think. I can't remember, or I'd retaken it recently. I can't remember what the situation was, but I did pretty well on it. And they, of course, they offered me other positions, but I was like, no, I want the 03 option. And 03 in the Marine Corps is our infantry. So for you 11 Bravos out there that were just making fun of me for being a 92 Yankee in the Guard, you can make fun of me now for being an 03 in the Marine Corps, because that's what I signed up for. I was a direct shipper, which meant that I wasn't delayed entry. I didn't have there wasn't a year waiting period for me to leave. I was just on call, essentially. The recruiter was going to call me, and the day he called me was the day I would go to MEPS and do my enlistment and then ship. Okay. And I think I'd do my physical, enlistment, ship all at the same time. Yeah, because I had to do another physical. I had a physical that I had taken to go on active duty for special work, and I'm not sure I can't remember if that met the requirements or I had to take a new physical at MEPS, but regardless, I went to MEPS on the evening of September 4th. Yeah. September 15th, something like that. And I shipped for San Diego. I enlisted in the Marine Corps as an 03 option, and I don't know how they're doing it now, but at the time, that meant I was guaranteed the infantry field, okay? But I wasn't guaranteed a specific job within the infantry. And the infantry has, you have riflemen, you have machine gunners, you have mortarmen, you had anti-tank assaultmen at that time. And am I missing? At the time, you couldn't enlist straight into the sniper field, and there was a recon contract, but it had one of those stipulations where if you didn't pass your screenings, you would go open or something. I can't remember. But anyway, the 03 option covered, you would either get an assaultman position, which is the rocket, guys, a rifleman position, a machine gunner, or a mortarman. And I guess that's it. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anything. But so that's what I took, and I shipped to San Diego, where I went to where I started recruit training. Now, I had a unique experience, or not, unique experience so much, but a bad experience at recruit training. I got 2 months into recruit training or Marine Corps boot camp, and then I was sent to the medical rehabilitation platoon. I developed really bad stress fractures, which required, it wasn't something that I wanted to do. It was something that it got noticed. How I was moving on them, not during the daytime, but at night. If you've ever had stress fractures, I don't know what your experience was, but my experience with the ones I had was, in the mornings it was really bad, but we would march and start running and the pain would just kind of go away. But then in the middle of the night, it would be really bad. So combination of shin splints and stress fractures. But when the drill instructor noticed that there was something up and sent me to the corpsman, and corpsman is our medics. If you don't know, corpsman is our medical guys, our EMTs, or whatever you want to call them, anyone in the medical field. And that's done by the Navy, because the Marine Corps doesn't have its own medical field. It's manned by the Navy. So they took me to the clinic or the hospital. I don't even remember, but they did X-rays, and if I remember correctly, they could actually see my injury, the stress fractures, on X-rays, which meant they had really become serious. Or maybe I don't know. If you're medical and you say, "Oh, that's bullcrap," it may have been another version. Maybe it's some other type of test. But whatever it was, they were very, very visible, and the medical officer immediately said, "No, he's definitely coming out of training." So I was sent to what you call the Medical Rehabilitation Platoon, MRP, and that was a disturbing experience. And I'll get into that in another video, but I would just let you know that it was very demotivating to go to the MRP. I would say 70% of those in the medical rehabilitation platoon were on their way out the door. And I was watching another YouTube video, and the guy, he's a Navy guy, but he actually said something I really never thought about, but I bet he's right. And he stated that he also went to the Navy's version of it, and his belief was that a lot of the people in MRP had pre-existing conditions, which you're not supposed to go into the military with pre-existing conditions. And the training just brought it out. So what the Navy was doing when they put them in MRP and just basically left them there, hoping that they would get discharged, because it would save the Navy from trying to pick up the bill on something that was already that they never should have been in. And now that I think back on that, hearing that, the medical officer, whenever I was going through MRP, it was like dead set on just letting me go home. I mean, it was a constant mental battle, because you would go to your appointments. Well, back up, you would be in the squad bay with all these other guys, and you were basically, training had ceased, and now you were just in a holding pattern, and the drill instructors that were there they were real drill instructors, but they weren't on training duty, and they were more just like regular dudes. They didn't, well, that's not true. They were still drill instructors, but they didn't have so much of an agenda for you every day. You can't take a medical rehabilitation platoon and have one thing that everyone has to do, because everyone has different appointments. And also they had ways that you could stay up to a certain degree with your training. And that was, there were classes. You obviously couldn't do any physical stuff, or for most people couldn't. But there was other classes and stuff that you could go to, check in the box stuff that you could kind of get knocked out of the way, so that when you went back to training, you may be able to jump ahead a week or something, or link back up with a platoon that may have been ahead of you, or at least you didn't get behind. So there were things that you could do, but it was really an individual thing. I mean, you went to these classes on your own, checklist, you went to your appointments on your own, and there just wasn't a whole lot of people telling you what to do. But there was a tremendous amount of people telling you what you should be doing. I'm talking about other recruits. I'm talking about sea lawyers. I'm talking about guys that had been in this system for months and months that that knew they were getting out, and they were just, collecting a check until the Marine Corps got tired of seeing them and discharged them and moved them to, I don't know what it was called, the separation platoon or something. I'm not sure. But that's where I was stuck. And I wanted to go back to training. I was 2 months deep in the training. I only had what we call going up north left. And then going up north was when you left San Diego Recruit Training Depot after 2 months, and then you went up to Camp Pendleton to do marksmanship training, and I guess you could say the field training that you actually did in boot camp, which I'll talk about what boot camp consisted of in another episode. And then the Crucible, which was new at the time, but it was a final exercise for Marines, and I believe still is, although I'm sure it's changed some in the last 20 years. This was 1998, by the way. So after I went there and I was on, I had a robo leg, which we call them, the boot, and I was had crutches, and I watched my original platoon. They left. I went to MRP and they went up north, and that was heartbreaking for me because I was a squad leader. I wasn't just I was first squad leader at that time. So I had done well in the platoon. I was one of the main guys. I was a first squad leader, which is, the only higher position I could have been in platoon would have been the platoon guide, an honor grad. But unfortunately, I had to watch those guys head up north, and that was heartbreaking for me to watch that happen and to see them leave me at the recruit depot for God knows how long. And then it got worse because 4 weeks later, they came back to the depot for their final week as Marines. Now, if you're not familiar with how the Marine Corps does it, it's different. And I can go back to my Army basic training experience. And this, again, disclaimer, this does not apply to Benning guys or Army infantry guys, because I know you have a whole separate thing, or at least you did at that time. So, but for everyone else in the Army at that time, from the day you got to basic training, you were called a soldier. You were treated as a soldier. You were treated as a soldier in training, and you got the whole. It's not hazing, but you got the whole aspect of that. But essentially, you were private. And you were called a private. The Marine Corps is not like that. The Navy is not like that. The Navy doesn't call you a sailor until you graduate. They call you a recruit, and the Marine Corps does too. But I think the Marine Corps I know the Marine Corps puts a lot more emphasis on earning that title. And the title is Marine. So when you go up north, you finish your last month in San Diego at Camp Pendleton, you come back, and the last week was family week. It was basically graduation prep week. And during graduation prep week, those Marines now, they finished the Crucible. They've been handed or awarded their Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, the emblem of a Marine. It's been given to them by their drill instructors, by the commanding officer, and they come back to the depot no longer as recruits, but now as Marines. And that is a tremendous change as far as how they're treated and how everyone else treats them when they come back. Now, this is important because I was still a recruit, and there were some instructors I don't know if they were trying to be nice or they had a sick sense of humor, but my MRP instructor sent me on a working party, to the barracks of my original platoon. And you think, well, that's cool. You got to see them. It's not like that. No matter how much they wanted to see me, no matter how much they were glad to see me, they weren't allowed to act towards me in any way humane. They were only allowed to treat me as a recruit. And I was there to clean their barracks while they got ready for graduation. So while I watched the now Marines that I completed, 2/3 of my training with, and I should have been graduating with them that week as a squad leader, I was sweeping the floor while they were putting their graduation uniforms together, and it was really tough for me. I'm not gonna lie. I was emotional, and you could tell they wanted to talk to me and to encourage me, but they weren't allowed to. One of them tried, and my drill instructor from that platoon, I never will forget his name. It was Sergeant Schaefer, and he came out and he yelled at me and he yelled at them, and basically, treated me worse that day than he did the day I left. He sent me the MRP essentially, and told me to keep my head up, and then but I didn't take it personal. Well, I did. I don't take it personal now. I understand the procedure. But that was really rough. But it was all good because it motivated me. And I remember going back to my doctor's appointment, and the medical officer all but begging me, or selling me, pitching me just to go home. This is something that you don't want to do. And I never understood why they would do that, but now I think I do. I think their job was to try to get me out of there so that the Navy didn't have to keep that bill in case it was a pre-existing condition. Um, but my legs had been jacked up my whole life, and I have had bow legs my whole life. So thinking back, I probably did have some, a natural tendency. I've always had shin splints. I've always had stress fractures. But I said no, and I kept training, and eventually I was able to join a different battalion and a different platoon, and that was a scary situation for me in Marine boot camp, because you're coming in at the tail end of their training. Essentially, their last 4 weeks, they're going up north. They're excited about this. They can see the light at the end of the tunnel, or at least they think they can. They have no idea what the next few years are going to entail. But this segment of it, they could see it, and they're excited. And now I'm coming in, and I'm being pushed into a camaraderie and a chemistry that's already, and I'm an outsider. I'm a stranger, and I was really, really concerned about how I would be treated. However, it wasn't like that. I actually, when I showed up to that platoon, what I didn't realize is the rarity of that, of how many people do go home, how many recruits do take those offers and leave. It's not as common as I expected for recruits to go back to training and to fight to go back to training, and at least at that time. So I was pulled into the drill instructor's office after I was checked in. Of course, I was hazed a little bit, I was kind of put in my place, brought back to the mentality. They were just trying to make sure, they knew coming out of MRP I was probably undisciplined, and they were trying to get me back in that mindset. So I went through a little physical encouragement, or reorientation. Let's just physical orientation of the body and mind. But after that was done, the senior drill instructor pulled me into the office, and he essentially told me off the record. And it wasn't a nice conversation, but at that time, comparatively speaking, it was nice. But he I don't remember in what words, but he just told me that he's always impressed by recruits that stick it out and push through MRP, that he knew personally. I don't know if he was an instructor there or what, but he knew personally how demotivating and demoralizing MRP could be. And he respected me for sticking it out and coming back to training to finish what I'd started. And that he would ensure that the platoon accepted me as one of their own. And he did. He went out there and he gave a speech to him, and he told him, hey, listen, and you have to understand that culture, that does mean something. All right. The recruits it's very tribal, and recruits are all been encouraged to almost hate other platoons and outsiders. But when the drill instructor says, hey, this is what he's been through, this is what he chose to do, he made the right decision that's in line with our core values, and he's one of us now, so treat him as such, then they do. And obviously I didn't come in and take a squad leader's position, nor did I expect to. I got to flying around here. But I didn't want that. I just wanted to get in there, to fall in my place, and to complete the training. And I did. So we went up north to Camp Pendleton. We did marksmanship phase, which was really my bread and butter. I mean, it was, shooting was something that I I hadn't, even though I was raised in the country, I hadn't done a tremendous amount of shooting as a kid. You know, I wasn't raised in competition shooting or with a, my dad was a hunter, you know, still is, but I didn't shoot a lot, other than zero your rifle for, you know, a short yardage and go to get in your deer stand. But it fascinated me, and in my experience in the National Guard, I was a good, you know, I was a good shot, and it just carried over into the Marine Corps. It was a completely different style, and I'll talk about the difference between basic Marine Corps marksmanship and an Army marksmanship, at least at that time, later on too. That'll be another episode. But that was, I enjoyed that part. Even had one of my range instructors betting on me to shoot the top of the class. Didn't get it. Somebody outshot me. I may have fallen in third or second. I can't remember, but I did pretty well. And then, you know, completed that, went through the Crucible, and I graduated. And I went, well, I didn't graduate right then. I finished the Crucible, was awarded the Eagle Globe and Anchor at the top of the Reaper, and San Diego grads know what I'm talking about. And I went back to the recruit depot, where I spent the coolest week, one of the coolest weeks of my Marine Corps career, and that was leaving a recruit and coming back a Marine and being surrounded by, you know, thousands of recruits and being a Marine, you know, like a drill instructor. Not the same respect as a drill instructor, obviously, but mountains of respect, and huge amounts of difference from being a recruit. It really did mean something, wearing that Eagle Globe and Anchor. And at the time, we had the old uniforms, old woodland uniforms, before the digital patterns came in. And when you went through training, you didn't have an Eagle Globe and Anchor embroidered onto your uniform. You ironed it on, and you only got to iron it on after you were awarded the physical one. So you didn't have that until you earned it. Okay, so it was a different time. So that was my Marine Corps boot camp experience. And from then I went home for 10 days, and then I went back to Infantry Training Battalion. We're at 26 minutes on this video. So I will try to take this in 30-minute segments for you guys. And, the next video I'll probably talk about Infantry Training Battalion, and then I might go back and talk about the difference between my experience in Army basic training and Marine Corps recruit training, and talk about the differences in my experiences there, and which one I thought was more difficult. So that is how I got my start in the Marine Corps, and from then, like I said, Infantry Training Battalion, and then the Fleet, and then other things from there. So appreciate you guys checking out my channel. Please, if you enjoy this content, hit a like, leave a comment, but most importantly, please subscribe to the Rogue Way. It helps me, and I appreciate it. Eventually, I'd like to get some video editing equipment and learn how to do it like these pro YouTubers do, which I have no idea how to do this stuff, but I'm going to learn. But until then, hey, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next chat session of the Roadway Podcast. Don't forget to also check out the Roadway Podcast live on Facebook, and the YouTube videos where, you know, I have guests and talk about random stuff too. So appreciate you guys checking me out, and we'll see you again soon.